Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. I'd like to identify myself with the comments of Congressman Brooks and Bridenstine earlier. They made some very good points, and I'd like to also identify with our witness, Mr. Is it Spudis? Is that how I pronounce it? Okay, Mr. Spudis, who is admonishing us to do things incrementally because it's affordable and getting something accomplished, as compared to laying down a 20-year program of gigantic spending that will suck the money away from all the other projects that NASA comes to mind in the next 20 years. In the next 20 years, I'm sure we will have lots of great ideas that may be more important than spending money on getting a man to the moon, to Mars, and planting a flag and coming back. In fact, if the Mars mission is to be successful, it appears to me that we need, if we were to say our goal is to have an American on Mars, we need to ask for volunteers and say, you're not coming back. That's the only way that would be affordable, and that's just a thought. In terms of the greatness challenge, I agree with you. America needs to do great things, and we are doing great things that inspire young people. We now have a reusable rocket system and are being developed, and that came from the private sector. And we have, Virgin Galactic about ready to make suborbital space a major part of Americans and Western civilization, because it's going to be spread us all over the world in a matter of minutes. These are great things that these young people are going to be able to participate in that didn't exist before. Blue Horizon, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, they're doing great and historic things. Let me just note that if we do decide, and it looks like the argument keeps going, go to Mars, go to Mars. I've heard this for 20 years. It looks like that's what people are forcing us into, this mode of spending. 10 years down the road, if we have committed ourselves to so many $1 billion every year that we're spending, and we end up spending $20 billion, $30 billion down the road, and let's say at that point, a meteorite, instead of skimming Russia like it did in 2013, a meteorite would hit a city and kill hundreds of thousands of people. Can I tell you what that would do to the priority of space spending for this body? They would cut everything off, because then the public would demand that we were spending our money on global defense rather than on planting the flag on Mars. And all of that money that we'd spent then would have been wasted. That is, what I just described is not a scenario that will never happen. It may never happen, but it could well happen. There's nobody in this room who believes that that might not happen in the next 20 years. So let's make sure that we do things incrementally, so when we are spending, at least if we do have to change spending priorities in the future, all of that money won't be wasted, won't be right down the toilet. We can't afford to do that, as Mr. Brooks pointed out. We can't afford to waste billions of dollars. We just can't afford that. It will bring us down as a country rather than uplift our country, which is what the space program is supposed to do. So I would suggest that maybe we need to calibrate our plans. We have global defense, which I just mentioned, is really an important thing. Clearing space debris. Pretty soon we're not going to be able to use space unless we actually initiate a program that's going to clear the space debris that will, again, when we're talking about our young people, they're used to now living in a world where we have GPS and we have telephones and we have all sorts of utilizations of space. And unless we start clearing that debris, there's going to be no more ideas about utilizing space, because there won't be any space up there to do this. They'll be filled with debris. So we have these challenges, and I would just hope that as we're discussing manned missions to Mars, that we keep in mind that if we end up defunding all these other programs, it'll bring us down. It'll bring the American space program down. So with that said, let me ask about the moon. I guess I'm already over, I'm sorry. But, and by the way, Mr. Chairman, I was the chairman here of this subcommittee years ago, and frankly, we had to force NASA to go around the moon by the poles in order to find out if there was going to be water or not. We had to basically force NASA to do that. They did not want to change the pattern of just going around parallel. Give us and you already mentioned this in passing, give us an example, again, if we have water on the moon, and we've expanded, now we know there's considerable water, that will permit manned presence on the moon, and will then also permit us to further manned use of space beyond the moon. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Effectively, the moon has two resources to offer at the poles. One is the water, which is in the form of the deposits of ice that have been stable for billions of years. And apparently it's present in massive quantities, at least if the estimates from our remote sensing are correct, there are at least hundreds of millions of tons. I personally think there are over billions of tons. The second thing you have that's critical are zones on the moon near the poles, which are in near permanent sunlight, which allows you to essentially stay on a sustainable basis on the moon. Now, water is useful both for sustaining human life. You can drink it, you can use it for sanitation, you can protect yourself from radiation. But more importantly, it's the most powerful chemical rocket propellant we know of. If you split water into its component atoms and then freeze that into a liquid, you've got liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, which is basically what the space shuttle main engine uses. There's enough ice at the poles of the moon to launch the equivalent of a space shuttle every day for over 2,000 years. So that's a lot of water. You're not going to run out of it soon. And if you're able to access it and process it and store it and send it into space, you've actually created a fueling depot that will allow you to go to Mars on a sustainable basis.
What would the cost, and we're talking about, we just mentioned the cost of going to Mars. What's the cost of what you're talking about?
It depends on how you approach it. And a lot of people have published ideas on this. I have published a paper on it. There was another paper this past summer. But I certainly think it's less than $100 billion. The key is to use robotic assets to get started, and then use people as they become necessary. So you can do this on the moon. You can't do it on asteroids, and you can't do it on Mars because the moon is close. So you're able to remotely control robots via teleoperation from the Earth, and you can't do that on the more distant targets.
Well, I just note, Mr. Chairman, when I talk about the potential of our space commercial sector, and space refueling is also something they could do, maybe not from Mars. And again, a private company might want to put up a space refueling station, and that would enable us perhaps to bring down the cost for space exploration and also for moon missions. And one last thought, and that is, sorry, I really think Elon Musk is going to be on Mars before NASA gets there. And just a thought. Thank you.